What's up, everybody? This is Ryan here, and I'm doing another live stream. So what I'll do today is I'll just wait a few minutes for people to show up, and then we will get started with the main topic, or the main tasks for today. But yeah, good day. It's summer here in Canada, and where I'm living, that means that I still have to wear a wool cardigan because it's actually kind of chilly, even though it's like almost 9 a.m. So, yeah. So what I'll do, it's 8:55 a.m. right now. I'm just going to wait until about 9 a.m. before I really get started coding. But I'll just spend a few minutes just going over my to-do list for today. What's up? Is Snap. Thanks for joining me. So, yeah, the plan for today, I'm gonna basically spend what'll hopefully be only about 20 minutes, but you know me, oh, you're from Holland. Goedendag. I used to work with someone who was Dutch. Sorry, for those wondering, I'm just responding to the chat here. So what I'll be working on today, I'll spend probably 15 minutes to a half hour rambling about different changes and approaches to software architecture and testing and my usage of third-party libraries. So I'll ramble about that stuff, and then we'll actually write some code. And the code that I'll be writing, I'm going to implement a particular feature of this application that I've been working on in kind of a series here. And yeah. So a couple days ago, I made the manage task feature, not the whole thing, but a lot of the classes, and that involved creating this logic class, which is effectively like a presenter type deal. And I built this class using test-driven development, or my own particular version of test-driven development. And I just think I saw an error here. So I think that should be update. That was handy. That's actually amusingly one of the drawbacks of my current testing approach. Anyways, so yeah, I'll just kind of ramble and I won't get into too much detail here until 3 minutes time when it is 9 a.m. and we will officially start. But yeah, I'll be talking about how what I learned in Kotlin really affected how I work in Java. And for those wondering, I still prefer Kotlin drastically. But one of the things I did recently is I upgraded my Gradle version. And when you upgrade your Gradle version, it allows you to use some interesting features of Java 8, which weren't necessarily backwards compatible in earlier versions of the Gradle Android plugin. So, anyways, I'll just address a few questions and we'll get started. So, I'll try and pronounce your name correctly. Pratam asks, can I make a video on how to consume GraphQI or GraphQL API with Apollo using model view ViewModel and coroutines with the repository pattern? Well, I have videos demonstrating how to use model view ViewModel with coroutines and the repository pattern, so you can certainly learn how to do that, and that is actually a different problem than dealing with the particulars of that API stack that you want to use. Unfortunately, I'm not planning to make a tutorial on GraphQI, or GraphQL, I think it actually is, API with Apollo, because those just aren't things that in this current stage in my career really interest me. But yeah, I do. You can learn how to build something like that in terms of the architecture and coroutines and Kotlin stuff through my tutorials, so do consider that. And from Sabin, hi bro, hope you're doing good. I am very good. Oh, this person just wants to say, I learned the confusing callback listener from you. That video of yours helped me a lot when I started off. Stay off from COVID-19, brother. Yeah. Thank you for the kind message, Sabin. I'm glad that video was useful. And I am planning to stay off the COVID as much as possible. Someone else wanted to mention that I look like Dewey from Malcolm in the Middle, which I know is a North American TV show, but I never actually watched it, so fair enough. Usually I get Bjorn from Vikings, but my hair's a little bit long to pull that look off. And what's up, Laurentiu? Do I think to try iOS development? By the way, I will get started with the coding in a minute here if you're wondering when I'll shut the hell up. I don't really ever plan to do iOS development. The truth is, I predict that within probably 5 years, mobile development in general will drastically change to the extent that things like Android and iOS will become less relevant. I could get into kind of a long explanation of why I think this is the case, but the simple point is I want you to just imagine, where is my phone so I can point at it while I talk. So on this phone you effectively have the front end, the graphical rendering drivers and code that you would write. Then you can also have like the middleware, the domain layer, the logic of the application. And then you also have the data storage on the phone, although you can also have cloud storage, remote storage. So I will tell you what will happen in the future. I will predict the future now. And the prediction is that if we get global high-speed internet and it's super fast and super reliable, it will no longer make sense to put the middleware or any kind of data storage for the application on the phone. These things will effectively just become graphic renderers, and every single button click and interaction you make will get immediately forwarded to some kind of remote application, and that remote application will then instantly reply back. Really what I'm saying here is most of the architecture of an application will move from the phone, the phone's operating system, and it will be moved into the cloud. And the cloud is just a stupid word for someone else's computer. So how that ties into the question I was just asked is that I really don't like Apple to begin with. They make some very good products, but I don't like their company. I don't like a lot of their business practices, and that's why I chose Android in terms of mobile development. And now that I'm pretty sure that even Android itself will become more or less obsolete as the lag time between internet connections is reduced, that makes even less sense for me to waste time learning Android or iOS. So I'm not saying you shouldn't, that's just my particular perspective on it. So anyways, time for me to get started with what I'm rambling about. So thank you for joining me, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. So we'll start with my to-do list for today. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to review the architecture of this little application and the approach I use. And for this part of the stream, I will try to do some teaching and it won't be so much practical coding. Once I do that, and that'll probably take me 15 minutes to 30 minutes, or if I'm in a very rambly mood, which it kind of seems like I am, that could take a little while. But I promise you, if you're an Android developer, or honestly an iOS developer, I don't really care, and whether you're working in Java or Kotlin, you will learn useful things, most likely. I can't guarantee it if you're an advanced developer, but if you're a junior, do listen, because I've got lots of tips for you. Once I've reviewed the architecture and my general approaches to different things, then we will get to actually writing most of the classes of one of the features in this application. So that'll involve writing a contract class, which is basically like an interface, like you see here. And I'll show you how I kind of do that. It'll involve creating an event class. So this is actually something I learned in Kotlin. In Kotlin, I love to use sealed classes. And this thing right here is actually like my own Java version of a sealed class, although it's implemented a bit differently. And then the actual class that we'll be writing, other than this stuff, is we will write a logic class for another feature. And a logic class is very much like a presenter or a controller. I call it a logic class because it handles the logic of the front end, and I'm tired of using other people's stupid names for things. So, yeah, that's basically it. The other thing I'll do is I'll try to cover this while I ramble about the software architecture, but obviously the title of this video includes test-driven development. I do not create every class, every line of code with test-driven development. There's lots of debates on whether that's a good thing to do or not. I personally don't. What I like to do is I create one class which basically handles all of the logic, hence why I call it logic, for a particular feature of the application. And this class I do write with test-driven development. So I can hop into, I can hop into task view tests down here. And this is the actual class that I wrote as I was building the task view logic class. So we'll kind of see my basic test-driven development process. So that's a bit of an overview. So I'll try and get through a few main points really quickly about how my approach, particularly with Java Android, has changed over time. Let me just have a quick look at the comments. Have I tried Jetpack Compose? I haven't tried it. I do like the look of it. I have really nice content. Thank you. Laurentiu asks, should I try Java or Kotlin? To be honest, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name remotely correctly. To be honest, Laurentiu, since you have a background in Swift, I would probably go straight into Kotlin, because Java is going to drive you crazy. I actually have a little bit of experience with Swift, and Kotlin and Swift, they have a lot of things in common, and they're both what I would call modern programming languages. Java, while I love it, and I'll be writing it here, the syntax is so verbose, it's insane. It's like, it'll give you carpal tunnel syndrome. In your case, you probably want to just go straight into learning Kotlin, because you already have that background in OOP languages. Okay, so what we're going to do now, by the way, how's the volume, everyone? Let me just, my OBS studio is telling me that the volume is incredibly loud. I'm just going to make sure that's proper before I get started here. Okay. All right, if it's too loud, let me know. I don't see any feedback yet, but there's of course quite a delay on the stream. All right, just gonna drink some water and then we'll get started with the lesson stuff. What's up, Ravi? Oops. Okay, here we go. So the first thing I wanted to ramble about, okay, sometimes it's loud, sometimes it's low. I was a little bit worried about that. That's regarding the sound. I'm gonna turn off something here. I've rambled about this before. I love how in Windows 10 you have to open this stupid extra menu just so you can get to the actual menu that you want to get to. Oh, what am I doing here? Wrong thing. Recording. All right, I'm just gonna turn that down a little, and okay, we'll see if that particular change will work. I can also just move my microphone around, but okay. If the sound gets really bad, do let me know, because I don't want anyone to be harassed by my computer's annoying way of cranking the volume up periodically. So the first thing I wanted to ramble about here is I used to be all about the third-party libraries. I liked RxJava, I liked Dagger 2, I liked all of the latest Android libraries. And at this stage in my career, I find myself using fewer and fewer and fewer libraries. For this particular application, apart from using JUnit in my tests, and using this thing allows me to use some Java 8 or above features in my code. So this isn't really so much an Android specific library, it just allows me to use Java features. So apart from front-end graphical stuff, which is one thing I do not want to do all manually, I am basically doing everything in this project here with my own code. So that means I'm handling concurrency using the Java executors framework. It means I'm building my own extension type functions using static methods. You'll see how I do that later on. I'm not really going to use a whole lot of third-party libraries from here on. And the reason why for that is that you start to learn over time that what libraries do for you is they allow you to solve problems really quickly, and oftentimes that's a good thing. And when you're working in a company and they want you to solve problems really quickly, and they don't actually care whether you understand what the tool is actually doing for you, or you're capable of actually solving that problem with your own code, that makes sense if you're in that kind of a setting. I'm basically working for myself at this point, which is absolutely wonderful. And that means I can take as much time as I want to learn how to actually write my own implementation of what RxJava or something like that would do for me. The benefit of this as well is that I don't have to worry about keeping track of all these different versions, and I don't need to worry about different third-party libraries conflicting and having improper versions. And so basically what I'm saying here is the benefit is that I spend less time configuring my project and my libraries and more time essentially having to write the code. So that's not always a good thing. Since I want to learn how to do these things myself, it's good that I write the code. But again, I'm not saying you should do this in your fast-paced startup environment. So that's one thing in particular. So the next thing, so that's the first thing I wanted to talk about that my approach has changed in. And you will even see, I used to use Mockito and a whole bunch of different tools in my test-driven development approach. I don't really do that anymore. Excuse me. I create fakes, which I'll show you how to do that later. I do use JUnit, but I don't technically have to. It just makes it easier because it means I can run tests like this instead of having to set up a main method and executing the tests from there. But yeah, apart from JUnit, I don't use any other thing to test my units. I should mention that this is made easier with my architecture. So let me go to, and so this is kind of some rambling about architecture. So I'm not sure how well you can see this menu down here, but in this feature, the one that I built previously, we have this thing called iTaskViewContract. This is a contract class which allows me to model and upfront design ahead of time the view and the view model of this particular feature. So what I'm doing here is I'm both, like I say, I'm using this interface to design things ahead of time, but this will also allow me to build these different things, the logic class, the view model, All of those can be built in isolation of each other. So that's one particular thing I wanted to point out here. We have a view, which I haven't implemented, and we won't work on that today. But a view class, obviously, this will be a fragment, and all it will do is basically it'll bind data to the user interface, and it'll listen to the user's interactions, and it will forward those interactions into the logic class, which, like I say, it's like a presenter. Now, the way that I manage this is we have this onViewEvent method in the logic class, which accepts a task view event. So like I said before, this class here, you'll notice it has an enum, and it has these things here. What this thing effectively does is it models interactions between the view and the logic class. So what we're doing here is instead of having, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 methods, which the view would call on the logic class, we have one method, and then basically we take in this one object, this event class, which is capable of representing different events. So event on start, when this feature is first started, when the user clicks on the color button, and then we tell the view what to do immediately. Why do I do this? Does this not seem just like extra work? What I'm doing is I'm pulling the logic out of the view, and I'm putting all the logic of one feature of my application, or as much logic as I can, into one single class. This single class does not have dependencies to any Android thing, any third-party library, any of that stuff. Why is that important? That means it's very easy to test. I don't need Espresso. I don't need RoboElectric. All I really need, and if I really was being a purist here, I wouldn't even need to use JUnit, but it just makes things a little easier. So as you can see here, that's my general approach for software architecture. One final point, probably some of you are wondering, okay, I've got this logic class, which is kind of like a presenter. What the hell is the view model for? I haven't actually implemented it here, so I will implement it shortly. But let's look at what the contract, which describes this view model, does. All it does is it holds a model. It holds, so task is the primary data model for this feature. Obviously, tasks view, it's going to display the data of a task, essentially. So the view model becomes a data store, like a cache, for front-end session data. So anything I need to hold in memory for this particular feature while the user is there, so something like the ID of a task object or a whole task object, all of that stuff will be persisted in this task view model. And this is actually closer to what the name view model would make you think it's about, as opposed to being something that's full of logic. And you'll see a lot of people who write view models that are full of logic. That's not necessarily an invalid way of doing MVVM, but if you want to do that, then the name view model is pretty stupid, because it's something that implies user interface and data storage, and it's full of logic. So you kind of should pick one. Okay, so that's a bit of an overview of the architecture that we'll be working on. There isn't too much for me to talk about. I have some questions about that are relevant to what I just said. So I'll answer some questions, run a quick commercial break, and then we'll get to the live coding aspect. So hopefully the sound isn't too low here. Okay, so I have a number of questions about why I'm not writing in Kotlin. So there's a bit of a long answer. I've had to, for work obligations, I've had to write a lot of Java lately for several months. And I also created a course in Java because it was very widely requested. And if you want to see it, you can click on the link down in the description box below to get a free trial of Skillshare for 2 months. And then you'll see all my Kotlin courses, my Java courses, all the stuff I just rambled about here in bite-sized videos, well, at least the Java stuff, with lots of good information. So the simple answer is that I have been writing Java for about 6 months now, having started with Java, then I did Kotlin for several years. Now I'm back to Java again. I will be back to Kotlin shortly, and I do actually prefer it as a language. But for the time being, I am out of practice with Kotlin. So I'm using this application to basically get an app done pretty quickly and learn some new things about Java that I wasn't familiar with. Like, for example, how do you handle concurrency in Java without RxJava? And I have put together some solutions for doing that. I don't think I've implemented them. Have I implemented them? Yes. Using the, or at least I thought I did. Okay, I'll work on that later. Using the executor framework. But I need to implement that first. Okay, so let's get started with the coding. Just going to run a quick commercial break and then we'll do that. Drink some water. Okay. So what we're going to do is, so I've got my little to-do list here, and I do suggest you follow to-do lists when you're coding. So the first thing I'm going to work on is making a contract class. So we're going to work on the manage task view, which is one particular feature of the application. And I'm going to write out the contract class if I haven't already. Sorry, we're not going to work on the manage task view. That's the one I did a couple days ago. We're actually going to work on the hour feature. And so a couple points here. Initially, I had the logic class in this contract interface. I've created a separate base. This is an abstract class. If you're wondering how to use these things, do check out my course down in the description box below, because I explain in very clear and simple terms when to use an abstract class, when to use an interface, and how to actually use them to solve problems. And this is something which gets so few people explain that clearly that it drives me insane. So I've created this base view logic class, which all of my view logic classes will extend. And this thing accepts a generic type, which you'll see will actually be one of my event classes. And this is where that onView event function or method that we saw earlier comes from. So I just wanted to point that out in case you're kind of wondering where it comes from. All right, so we're going to design our contract class. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to actually open up the user interface. So that'll be, I think, fragment our view. And all I want to do here is I want to see a design preview. And this is basically the ugly version of it, but this is what I'll be working from. Now, having this open, I'm going to basically look at it and kind of figure out on the fly which methods I will need in the view. Now, I'm not trying to get this perfect on the very first try. I'm just trying to get a relative idea. So the first thing I will do is we're going to manage, so the back button will basically be like done. So we'll call this one on done click. So that'll be my first interface method. Oops. We'll do, so I've got a switch here. So we'll say on So these are quarter hours, in case you're wondering what these things are. So this would actually say 12:15, this would say 12:30, this would say 12:45, and you can toggle them on and off. So that would be on quarter hour toggle. And I will pass in some data there. What we'll do, sorry, I'm actually doing this wrong because it's early in the morning. This is actually going to be, those are going to be things that are modeled in our event class. So let me just build that event class. So we're going to do our view event. So I'm going to go to new Java class, our view event. This will be public, and this will just be like task view event. So I should really pull that stuff into a abstract class. I'll probably do that later. And this will be our view event dot event, and then we'll create our little enum here. And I'll explain why I'm creating this enum in a moment. Let's see, why is that not working? So it's complaining because of the constructor. This needs to be that type. This needs to be that type. Okay. And so what this enum is it's effectively like a sealed class if you're coming from Kotlin. So I'm going to have like a name for every potential user interface event that can propagate. So when the user hits the back button here, that's going to be registered as an on done click, for example. Now, if one of these events needs to pass some kind of data, that's why I have this class wrapping the enum, and this class is capable of holding on to some kind of plain Java object as the actual value which needs to get passed in. So we'll see kind of how that works in a minute. Okay, so let's get rid of that. And I'm just going to get rid of a few things here. I know I'll need on done click, on start. We'll have on quarter toggle. So you're probably wondering what a quarter is. In the domain package of this application, I've got task, I've got hour, I've got day, I've got quarter hour. So these are all different ways of representing basically a daily schedule and different tasks within that daily schedule. And then down to quarter hours, which is where that is coming from, and which is what you see here. So we've got on quarter hour toggle. We've got on, this will be on task selected. I'm just making these up, by the way, on task selected. This is totally live coding. And there's not too much else going on here. Now, the thing I need to do is that when someone toggles a quarter hour, I need to know which quarter hour they're talking about. So when we call this event, that would be one particular case where I will need to actually include the value in that particular method call. All right, so I think that's pretty much it here. Yeah, I don't actually see any other interactions. I particularly chose a pretty simple feature here to build today because talking and writing code at the same time is it can be difficult. Okay, so now that I've got those interactions done, what I need to figure out is what methods will the logic class call on this view. So I could see, for example, this thing here, this 12 p.m. thing, that will need to get set. So let me just see what I called that in. All right, so we need to open up view quarter hour toggle. So this is the actual view that we're looking at there. And I want to know what is this thing called. So this is the label quarter hour. So set quarter hour, we'll call it that. So that's going to be void set quarter hour, and that'll be given probably, I think we'll do a string. We'll call it that. And then I might also have to include which quarter hour it is. So this is kind of an interesting little design problem here. So what I can do, we'll include the actual, so there's a quarter enum, which I wrote. Let me just show you that in domain constants. So we have 0, 15, 30, and 45. So and obviously that will represent these different quarter hours here. So I'll pass in that enum, and then we'll also pass in the hour, which could be, in this case, 12. And I think I can get away with just passing in an integer, although on second thought, let's just make it a string, because I'm not really worried about memory constraints, and I might as well do it in the logic class. String hour. That'll be the first one. Okay, so we've got the first one here. We'll need to set the task drop-down menu. So we'll say, I just lost my interface here. Not that one. Okay, so we'll say void set quarter hour. This should actually be set quarter hour text. This should be set quarter hour drop down. Again, we'll pass in the quarter. Just to make that consistent, we'll shorten that a little bit. And then the name of the task. So we'll say string task name. Good. So that's when we want to set this. This is a drop-down menu here, a spinner. And then we'll say set quarter. I want to know whether one is toggled or not based on the data that's passed in. So we can say void set quarter hour active. And then we could say we'll pass in a quarter again. You can start to see a pattern. And then we'll pass in a Boolean is active. And that's what we use to set the radio button or the toggle switch on or off. That's pretty much it. The only other thing I know ahead of time that I'll need is I'll need void navigate. Let me zoom in a little for you. To day view. So this is just the previous view or screen or feature that you would go to once you're done changing your hour or your quarter hour stuff. And I don't actually need any data passed in, so that's perfectly sufficient there. So I think that's everything I need to worry about for now for the view. Now for the view model, so every hour, so hour itself is a data model, and this view model here will hold on to one of those hour data models during the time that this particular feature of the application is open and the user is using it. So what we'll do is we'll just have void set hour, and that'll take in an hour object. And then we'll have void, let's see here, no, this won't be void, this will be hour get hour. Quick question from Ravi. Hey Ryan, will you be writing tests for your view model in this app? Well, I won't. I could. The reason why I won't is that the view models will be so incredibly simple that I don't really need to test them. Apologies for the lighting, by the way. It's a overcast summer day here in Canada. So anyways, yeah, so that's the reason. Now, if you are the kind of person who likes to fill view models full of logic, I do think you should test it. I personally don't, and therefore I don't. Now, the other thing is my view models will not be extending Android view model, the view model class from the Android Jetpack library, because it just doesn't suit my use case. I require something much simpler than that. Okay, so we've got the contract interface more or less figured out here. Let me just double check with the other contract. So that was, I think, iTask view contract. Let me see if there's anything. Okay, so I want this show message. Each of my views, I want them capable of showing messages in case an error occurs. So we'll paste that in. That's basically it for the contract class. So I'm going to hop into, what I'll do is, so I'll take a break and answer some questions if anyone has questions about what I'm doing. Hopefully the questions will be relevant to what I'm doing, but if you ask a good question, I might just answer it anyways. And we're going to hop in here and just say that we have done the contract class. And while I was busy rambling, I think I also finished the event class here. So on task selected, on done click, on quarter toggled, on start. That covers all the different interactions from the front end. And we'll see how to do things like pass data in from there. Okay, so we'll call that done as well, and then we'll get to some TDD stuff. All right. Just gonna have some water. So Abner asked, do I make a living as an app developer? Is it enough for me? The truth is, I make a living from a lot of different sources. Some part of that is app development, some part of that is YouTube, some part of that is the educational courses I've made. And then the other part of that is I'm very, very, very lucky to have recently moved to a location where my expenses are very low. So that means I don't have to basically work for some company unless I want to. And periodically I do work for companies to make some extra cash. But the thing about being like an individual freelance product owner, software developer, you have to have a marketing apparatus. You can't just make applications and sell them on the Google Play Store and expect to make a living, because no one will find them, even if they're good applications. So while a big part of this YouTube channel is me sharing information and trying to give back to the community that taught me so much, another part of it is that it's a very practical marketing platform. Other people might lie to you, and I'm just being straight up with you that is an aspect of the YouTube channel, and the educational stuff I do is both something I love to do and something which is a part of my business, and a very necessary part in this day and age. You need web presence, you need social networking stuff. That's funny. So Ben mentions, I sound like Conor McGregor whenever I say water. That's when I fucking shave me hair off, I actually sound quite a bit like Conor fucking McGregor. You'll do nothing. I used to be able to do a pretty good Irish accent. I can't really do Conor McGregor's Irish accent, but I can do kind of a good generic Irish accent. I'm not sure what part of the country that's from, but I actually am part Irish, in case you're wondering. Anyways, hopefully me little Irish accent was a little entertaining for you. Okay, I'm waiting for questions in case they come in, and there's a long delay for the stream, so if you're wondering why I'm sitting here doing an Irish accent, that's why. Water. For my ESL friends, there are some crazy English accents out there. I'm glad I was able to make Ahmed laugh with me Irish accent. Maybe I'll do an Irish accent for the last bit of this thing. Alright, so Ravi asks, how is InVision for prototype and stuff? Which of these tools is good for app developers to wireframe? So what I'll do is I'll pull up InVision for you and give you a quick demo of what I've done. For anyone who's actually Irish and listening, I do apologize. I know my Irish accent isn't perfect. I haven't practiced it. I haven't been practicing it much lately. Alright, so I'll return to my normal North American Canadian English accent so that my ESL viewers can actually understand what the hell I'm saying. Okay, so the question, Ravi was just wondering, how is InVision for prototyping stuff? The actual application that I'm showing you here today, I prototyped it using InVision. So as you can see, we've got the day view here. So I built this first. Let me show you the actual thing that we're working on now. That was the hour view. So this is what the hour view is supposed to look like. It'll have that contrast color here, and this is what it looks like so far in Android Studio. I'll add that coloring in programmatically so that when a task is active, it'll have the lavender type color there, which is like the accent color. So to answer your question, I do very much like InVision. It's simple enough that I can use it, and yeah, anyways. So, yeah, InVision gets my seal of approval. Okay, and one more. My friend from Holland here asks, do I know Scrum? I have like a vague idea of how it works, and I've worked in an agile type Scrum setting once before. It's more appropriate if you're working in a big company and you've got a team going, whereas I usually either work alone or in very small groups, and we do follow an agile Scrum type setup, but let me put it this way, I wouldn't consider myself a Scrum master. I'm glad to hear me Conor McGregor impression is spot on, at least to my friend here, Subind. Okay, so let's get back to coding. So we just finished the contract class, which is an interface. We just finished the event enum class, and now we're going to create the test class. So I'm going to hit Alt-1 to open up the project panel. I'm just going to close some stuff that I don't need here. Manage hours, what we're working on. And then, so I'm going to make, this is in the test package in my app build, or my app module, sorry. If in case you're ever wondering, Android test is for like Espresso and Android UI testing, whereas the test package is for unit tests, which is what I'll be writing. That's a very good question, Harish. I will answer your question later if you stick around. I'm just going to do some coding for a minute. Otherwise, I'll ramble the whole live stream. But very good question, how to learn from documentation. I do have some suggestions for that. So I'm going to right-click on this test package and create a new class called Our View Tests. And Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I'm going to close. First, I'll open up a couple things. So a couple days ago, one of the first things you're going to want to do if you are getting into like testing and you're doing sort of unit testing stuff, you want to create a, I should say what I like to do, what I suggest is you create a test data class, and this test data class is where you will create dummy test data for your tests. So pretty much for every data model that you have, so if I go back into the, oops, sometimes my mouse thinks I'm clicking and dragging when I'm really not. If I go into the domain package here, you'll see we have day, hour, quarter hour, tasks. These are all my data models, and you want to create a test data class which will allow you to really quickly create these different data models with some fake data that you can just use to test things. So for every one of these things, I've got get quarter hour, get hour. I don't think this is correct. Yeah, I think I messed up here. This is, okay, well, let me just fix this while we're here talking about it. So this is supposed to be, yeah, this is only supposed to have 4 quarter hours. So let me just get rid of that. I think I thought I was making a day. All right, so we'll make that, just while we're here, let's make the day test method. So we'll say day, and again, day is one of my data models. That's where that's coming from. Get test day. This is kind of good. I can show you how I make these things. So we'll say return new day. And then I'm going to hit, okay, so we need a hour mode, which is some kind of enum. So all of these different things that I will need in here, I'm going to make static final fields. So say, I'll just hit Control D, and this needs to be hour mode. Oh, sorry, I got a spam phone call from Texas. Let me just put my phone on mute. That's pretty weird. I don't normally get phone calls from Texas, considering I live in Canada. Okay, so we've got, we're going to call that mode. And this is going to be from, so hour mode is actually an enum again. And you can either have a 12-hour or a 24-hour clock. For now, we're going to do 12-hour. So I've created that, and then we'll provide that in here. So we'll say mode. And then the other thing that this thing needs is it requires a collection of hours. So what I'll do here is I'll say new hour. So this is an hour array. Then we'll do the curly braces. And then we'll say get test hour. And then I'm going to have to do that 24 times because there are obviously 24 hours in a day. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Huh. All in one breath. Okay, and that's all we need to do there, except adding a semicolon. Good old Java, gotta have your semicolons. So yeah, I create this test data, and you'll see how this helps us create our tests a lot quicker when we want test data. Okay, so now that that's done, we'll hop into our hour view test thing here. I'm going to open the other test class, which was task view test, I think, because I have the memory of a goldfish, and I can't always remember how I set these things up. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to create fakes. So we're going to do that. So we have our class that we want to test, and this will be the real thing. So we'll say private our view logic, and that thing doesn't have a proper constructor yet, so that's why it's complaining. So private our view logic. I don't know why I put parentheses there. And then what we'll do is we need, I'll actually set that up first. This is one thing that I don't actually follow. Oh, it wasn't public. That's what it was. This is one thing that I don't actually follow in, so test-driven development purists would say that I shouldn't go in here and work a bit on this logic class, like set up the constructor and stuff like that. I'm actually going to do that ahead of time because I'm not really bothered by doing that ahead of time. Oh, someone might have saw an error. Did I have a... good eye. That was Ravi again. Okay, so this is the actual class to be tested. Now, I haven't written it yet. We're going to write it as we write the tests. That's more or less test-driven development. So this thing will need to have the two interfaces. So it will have an our view contract.view, and we'll call that thing view. And notice this is an interface. That's very important. And then it'll have the view model, and we'll call that one VM. And I think that's all this. Oh, it also will need access to storage. So we'll say private day storage is where that will come from. And we'll call that storage. So these are the different actors that my logic class will be interacting with. Now, why are they interfaces? These are all interfaces. Why? Because I can build my logic class and verify that it functions properly without having to actually build those classes. Isn't that amazing? Like, if you're actually wondering how awesome interfaces are, I can build things in isolation of each other and verify that they work. That's pretty cool in my opinion. Okay, so we've got that, and then I'm just going to create a basic constructor. And that's as much work as I will do in here for now. I am going to worry about creating that. A test-driven development purist would say that I shouldn't write any of this code until I have a test written and it's failing. Now we'll go and do that. I don't care quite so much. But before we get to that, I want to create some fakes. So now we're going to create the fake versions of these various interfaces that we'll have here, and that's what the logic class will talk to. So how we do that is we're going to say private fake our view. We'll call that view. And I'm going to create this class within this test class as well. It'll be a nested class. So we'll say create inner class. And let me just make sure I do this properly. Okay, so it's got to extend the interface. So we'll say implements our view. I'm pretty sure that's what I called it. Oh, our contract, my mistake. .view. And this thing is probably not public. There we go. All right, so we're saying our contract.view is what our fake view extends or implements. I'm going to hit Alt-Enter, implement methods. And obviously that will implement, I don't know why I closed that thing down. Our contract. So this is the thing that we wrote earlier, and now I'm making a fake version of it, and then we'll give this fake version to the logic class, and that's how we'll run our tests, basically. Okay, so what I'll typically do, so this is the kind of class, if you've ever used Mockito, Mock-K for Kotlin, there's other tools. What was another one? Hamcrest or some stupid thing like that. They create mocks or fake versions or test doubles. There's so many different names for these things. And so effectively what I'm doing here, if you're familiar at all with Mockito or any mocking framework, I'm actually writing the code that the mocking framework would generate for me. Is that extra work? Yes and no. It's not that much extra work, but it means one less third-party library that I need to have in my application. So that's kind of why I do it that way. Okay, so typically how I write these things, I'll show you a completed one, is that for every, let me just scroll down to it here. So for every method that can get called, I'll usually have a Boolean, and I'll check against that Boolean to see whether or not the method was called. So if the logic class calls setTask, then I say setTask called equals true, and then in my actual test function, I will check that. I'll say, where's one example here? I'll assert that VM or view set something called is true, and that'll tell me whether or not the logic class did what it is supposed to do. I hope that makes sense. Testing is kind of a difficult thing to explain to absolute beginners, so I'm kind of moving it through it really quickly. And if it seems really complicated, just understand it took me many months to understand how to write good, well-formed tests and how the whole process worked. Okay, so let's write this class here. So we'll add some Booleans. I'm probably just going to copy and paste some things here to save some typing. Not that that will save me all that much time. So Boolean set quarter hour text called. We're going to start them off false initially, so that unless they the methods actually get called, then the test will fail. Set quarter hour text called. This will be all of these things here. I'm just going to open this thing. Actually, let's do it this way. I'll open this vertically on the side here so you can also see what I'm doing. Okay. I'll have to zoom out a little. I apologize. Okay, so set quarter hour text called. This will be set quarter hour dropdown called. This one will be set quarter hour active. This will be, I'm actually not going to say set, or no, that's fine, never mind. I'm being nitpicky about naming, which is something I like to do all the time. Set navigate, we'll say navigate, oh, I can't type, wow. Navigate to day view called equals false. By the way, I write this stuff a lot quicker when I'm not trying to explain what I'm doing at the same time. Show message called false. Okay, and then for each of these methods, I will set the Boolean. So here we would say set quarter hour, which one is it? Set quarter hour text equals true. This is quarter hour dropdown equals true. Set quarter hour active call equals true. Navigate to day view. Show message. Okay, so that's our first fake. I'll just move this over and we'll look at what we just did here. So yeah, so this is the first fake, and that's what we will give to the logic class. And now we need to make the fake hour view model, and that we'll call that VM. That one will extend the view model interface, of course. I should say implement. And this one will be much simpler. Now, it's a little different for these view models. What I'm going to have this thing do is it'll actually have a, let me just get rid of that. It'll actually have a data model set to null initially. So this one will have a private hour, and that'll be set to null initially. $1 million mistake there for Java. And what I'll do is if setHour gets called, we'll say this.hour equals hour. And I'll add in those booleans as well. So we'll have private boolean setHour called equals false. Same thing as before. This will be getHour called. That'll be false. Yes, that's fine. And then our getHour will return this dot hour. And obviously we'll want to say setHour called equals true. And this will be this is getHour called equals true. Okay, so we've got our fakes, and now we're just about ready to start writing our actual tests here. I'll just point out we also need a storage class, so this will be day storage is where the day, hour, quarter hour data will be stored. And I might need to create that as well. I think I already created a fake storage here. This should say fake task storage to be a little more specific. This is a different data source. This is a different repository. So what I'll do is I'll actually create a new class here. We'll call this fake day storage. I don't like this new Android Studio thing that pops up here. It just bothers me. Okay, so class fake day storage implements day storage. Implement the methods, and let me just see how I do this. So for these data sources, I have another field will fail. So this is something that I will set on a per test basis. If I want my fake storage implementation to return an error to fail deliberately, then I will call set will fail, and I'll set that to whatever I pass in here. And as you can see here, when we call something like get task, if will fail is true, then we call the exception callback instead of the success callback. This might be worth talking about in a little bit, so I probably will. Okay. So what we'll do next is, we'll actually implement this thing. So I'm just going to copy and paste this because it's going to be exactly the same. And we'll say, I'm actually also going to copy and paste this stuff here because it's more or less exactly the same thing, except here we need to return a day. So we'll say get test day. See, we're using that thing we just created earlier, testData.getTestDay. And then in this one, what do we do here? We're actually going to return null because this particular continuation is void type. We don't actually care when we update a day. We don't actually care what the value is. We just want to know if it's successful or not. Okay, so that's all I need to do there, and we have our fakes created. Next thing we'll do is we'll set up our JUnit 5 setup method. So I'll show you how to do that. It's pretty simple. So you'll want to create a method which has the @before each annotation. Now, important note here. If you're using JUnit 4, this will be a different name. I think it's just like @before. I'm using JUnit 5 because it's better. So just a pro tip. Ravi asks, what is a continuation? I will explain that because that's actually one of the... I've actually implemented my own version of coroutines in Java, so I will definitely talk about that. That's a cool subject for anyone wondering about coroutines. Okay, so we set up our before each method. This method will be invoked before each individual test class. So i.e. any method in here which is annotated with test. So this is where we set things up. Now I just copied and pasted it, so I'll have to fix this thing. So view will need to be, we'll now need to refer to this class, so I'll just go like this. This thing will need set day, or is it set? Yeah, set hour. We'll say get test hour. Why am I calling set hour called equals to false here? I'm resetting it because I've called vm.setHour. I've given it a test hour, and that will flip the Boolean that we saw earlier, but I want it to remain false because I don't want it to actually register as true unless this logic class itself calls that method. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so, and then we've got fake day storage here. And then this will be our view logic. And why is this complaining? Fake view. Okay, so I called this fake our view. That's why it's complaining. Okay, so that's our test method. Cool, we're basically ready to write tests now. I'm just going to copy and paste one in because I'm too lazy to write the whole thing out. This is live test-driven development, finally. So for each of these tests, what happens is I'm going to model it like the view is calling onView event. So I'll need to set that up momentarily. This will be our view event, the thing that we wrote earlier. And what test do we want to write first? What's a good idea? I would think on, we'll do on start. So on start is one of our events here. As you can see, on start. This is the event that we'll be modeling. I don't need any data for on start, or actually I might need to pass in the ID for this particular hour. We'll see. I might change that later, but for now we'll leave it just as an empty string. And so what we're doing here, so we've got the actual thing that we're going to be calling, we've got our event, and then I need to decide what I want to do. So here's a pro tip if you're doing test-driven development. There's a process you can follow, there's a process I follow, which goes a little something like this. First, in plain English or whatever language you happen to prefer, explain this particular unit or method. Then write basically verbal pseudo code in steps, which explains that thing, and then you write the code. And what we'll see is, again, it'll look like it'll take more time up front, but what I'm actually doing is I am designing this unit, this function, this algorithm in finer and finer detail. I'm starting with the general idea and then I'm getting more specific as I keep writing. And that allows me to write them really quickly without having to think too hard about it. So I'm going to create a Javadoc comment. And what's going to happen when onStart is called? So let me look at the UI again, and I'll make that decision by looking at the actual user interface. Okay, so when this feature starts up, I'm going to want to make sure that I set these views up properly. So what I would need to do based on my contract here is I will need to call each of these methods, set quarter hour dropdown, set text dropdown active, for each of these, where did I go? For each of these blocks here. So that's kind of my hint. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I want to be absolutely sure not only that I'm calling these methods on the view, but I want to be sure that all of these then I'm calling it 4 times essentially. So this is again something you could do in a tool like Mockito, but I'm going to manually go back to my fake hour view, and I'm going to make an integer, int number of times set quarter hour. We're going to be even more specific than that. I was going to do something general. Oops, I don't like when it does that. Number of times set quarter hour text called equals 0. We initialize it to 0. Okay, just bear with me for a minute here. It's going to equal 0. Why are you still complaining? Because it's the same thing. Number of times. Hopefully it makes sense what I'm doing. If it doesn't, then just let me know. I'm basically just expanding the capabilities of my fake here so that I can get more accurate information from it. This one is active, and okay, yep. Not the naming convention here is a little bit silly, but I'm not too bothered about that. Okay, and I don't need it for these two. So what am I doing here? Every time these things get called, I'm going to record that call. This is just like you would do in Mockito or Mock-K or whatever. So here we're going to say set quarter hour. So we'll find the integer number of times quarter hour text called, and this will be plus plus, so we'll just increment it by 1. And then we'll do the same thing down here for drop down. Obviously I misspelled that somehow, drop down. And same thing down here. Okay, cool. So hopefully you're able to follow along with what I'm doing. Usually that's not often the case with test-driven development stuff. Okay, so what are we going to do now? All right, so when onStart is called, the first thing I want to do is I want to basically render the view appropriately. So I want that to say 12:15, that to say 12:30, that to say 12:45. If any of these things are already active, based on what we have stored in the database, I want them to be set to active. And I want, so these things down here, this drop-down menu, which I need to increase the font size, these are tasks, task objects. So what I'll do is we're going to say, we're going to make an assertion, view dot, and remember, important note, here we're referring to the concrete fake class name, not the interface, and that's how I'm able to mess with this stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to say view dot number of times blah blah blah. We'll say that equals 1. Sorry, not 1, 4. Okay, so now we're verifying this test will fail unless this function is called 4 times. I'm going to take a quick break, so if anyone has any questions, we can get to those, and I'll answer some questions that I had earlier. So let me drink some water. Okay, so Harish, if you're still around, Harish had a question. Any suggestions on how to learn from documentation? In a nutshell, don't. But let me give a better answer than that. not all programming documentation is created equal. You will find programming documentation that assumes you know everything there is to know. It's almost like it's written by someone explaining it to someone who already understands the entire program. So there's a lot of really awful documentation out there. How I recommend you use documentation, and now I'm speaking specifically here of Java documentation, use it as a reference. I think that's particularly important. So let me give you an example here. If I'm like solving a problem and I want to look up if, what's an example? Let me see. We'll say optional. Okay, so let's say I'm working in Java. I'll give you like a real life scenario here so we can kind of follow along. Let's say I'm working in Java and I'm used to working in Kotlin, and I want something similar to Kotlin's nullable operator. So I want to know, I've kind of heard, oh, well, I've heard about this thing in Java called optional. And I want to know, does this thing already, will this thing be a useful replacement for the feature in Kotlin that I want to see in Java? So I open up the documentation and I look in here and I want to just have a quick look at the functions, the methods, and see what does this thing allow me to do. And so fortunately, the documentation for Android at this stage is very, very good. And you can even sometimes go into it and straight away and learn from it. The Android documentation is very, very good. There are other things I find, in particular the Oracle Java documentation can be particularly useless unless you're really quite an advanced developer. They tend to write code for senior developers, write documentation for very advanced developers. So that would be a situation where you might go into the documentation and all you'll end up doing is getting discouraged. So the point I'm trying to get at here is that documentation is very hit and miss. Sometimes it will tell you exactly what you want to see, and sometimes it will just confuse you. I wouldn't use it as a primary learning source if that's what you're asking. I think that's what you're asking. I would use it as a secondary learning resource. What I recommend to every developer in every programming language, whatever you are doing, you want to use writing code, building demo applications as your primary learning tool, and then use that to guide you. And as you're building a program, you'll see, oh, I want to know if this particular class has some feature, and then that's when you go into the documentation and you say, does this thing do what I want it to do? Again, the documentation might not tell you. If it's Android, it probably will. If it's other sources, it might not. So hopefully that answers your question. I kind of went all over the place there, but it is what it is. Okay, so there was a couple other questions that I'll get to, and then we'll return to live test-driven development. What is a continuation? So this is actually relevant to what we're doing here. Let me pull something up in the Kotlin documentation. Okay, so this is the Kotlin documentation, and don't worry if you're a Java developer. I'm only just abstractly bringing this into the picture. Continuations are an aspect of coroutines, and really what they are is they are callbacks. So you can, here we have extension functions on it. We do some some operation on the background, some background data operation, and then when that operation is finished, then we call the continuation. We call resume on it or whatever you want. So let me show you what I've written in my program. Inspired by Kotlin coroutines, and because I always try to make my Java code more Kotlin-like, I've created a class in the common, an interface rather, in the common package of this project called continuation. It's just an interface, and what it does is it has a generic type in case there's some kind of value I want to return, some kind of data, and it has two methods, on success, on exception. Let me show you how it works in practice. If I can, I might have to open up a different... Well, I can show you how it works in the fake. I haven't written the actual repository, but this fake will suffice. So what the fake will do, in reality what it would do, is it would call some method. So let's say we have day storage. This is the local file storage on this application, which will store the user's day, the data for the application. It doesn't matter so much the specifics here. It stores the user's data. This is obviously an operation which requires reading and writing to the file system, and this would be something which would be a long-running operation. So I just see what happens here. I'll attempt to write to the file storage. If that happens successfully, I will call this continuation object, reference rather, and then I will say either on success if it worked, and I'll return the data, or I will say on exception, and I'll return the exception. So in the class, let me just pull up another project so I can show you why this is important. Just give me one moment here. I'll open up another project in Android Studio and my computer will lag, but just give me a minute. This is a really important example. Okay, my frame rate has probably tanked. Okay, so let me show you how I actually use this thing. And this is how I've actually effectively replaced coroutines. This is my version of coroutines in Java, basically. A much simpler version, mind you. Okay, so we've got, again, this is a different project, but it's the same idea. We've got our file storage, and that thing will do what it needs to do. Within our repository, so this would actually be our repository implementation, we call executors. So this will allow us to perform this call on the background thread. We do our background call to the storage. Here we're requesting data from the storage. And then if that succeeds, we return to the main thread, and then that's when we would pass that data into our callback, either the successful data or the exception. So what I just showed you there is my own implementation of concurrency using the Java Executor framework, which is a platform framework, Java standard library, and how to call back using my own implementation of continuations. Continuation is just a fancy word for a callback. That's really all it means. It's an object that you can pass into some function and then call back to it and send the data back upstream, basically. Hopefully that makes sense. I might do one more question. Revi, yes, I once used JSON data from assets to assert them to the function. I'm not sure what you mean by assert them to the function calls. I think you're talking about in a test environment. I don't see any problem with that. The only problem potentially with that approach is that it might be kind of slow because you're marshalling and unmarshalling JSON. But if it works for you, then I think that's fine. Sorry, I'm not sure what you mean. I and Impl hadn't seen that. Any particular reason? Could you rephrase that a little specifically? I'm assuming you're talking about something here, but we'll see. Anyways, so back to what we're doing here. I just realized that I've been rambling for an hour and a half. Okay, so let's get back to writing our tests. Okay, so let's get rid of that, get rid of that. We don't need continuation. Okay. So I was writing not tasks view tests, this one here. Okay, so here we are on start. So first, like I said before, verbally describe what happens. So when the feature first starts, we want to bind the data from storage to the user interface appropriately. So we've just, in like a sentence or two, verbally explain what happens here. Excuse me. Now I'll write out an itemized list of steps. So we'll say 1, retrieve hour from storage. So we need to retrieve our data model. For each quarter hour, bind the text, bind the hour display, drop down task menu, and toggle button. So we're really just saying we want this thing to accurately reflect the data that has been stored. So we retrieve the hour object from the storage, and then we bind that data to the user interface so that it actually looks proper. It, like I said, well, I closed InVision, so I won't show you what it looks like, but we'll see. And then that's basically it. So I've got a rough idea of what I need to do here. So we're just going to make an assertion. So the first thing we'll do is we will say assert that storage dot, I can't remember if I added that thing in there, iday storage. No, fake day storage. You know what? I don't actually need to assert that. I'll just know if it's working or not. So that's not actually an issue there. This thing will be created with a... Yeah, everything's good to go. So I don't actually need to assert that. I will assert... Okay, so when the application is when this feature first starts, how it'll work is that the view model will be given by the activity the appropriate ID for the hour that I want in storage. So what we'll do is we will say so I need to refine what I wrote up here. This needs to be more accurate. And this is part of test-driven development. You refine things over time. Okay, so what we say is get our ID from ViewModel. We'll see how this kind of works later if you're kind of confused. Why does the ViewModel have the ID before the logic class does? We'll deal with that later. Okay, so that means the first assertion I want to make is vm.set get hour called. So I want to make sure that that function was called on the view model. This one down here. Now, what I need to do ahead of time, because this thing is initially null, is I need to go up here and I need to actually say vm.setHour, and then we'll call testData.getTestHour. And then I'm just going to reset that vm.setHour called equals false. Sorry, I'm an idiot. I already did that. I did that up here. My mistake. Okay, we're good to go. I just want to know, did that get called? Okay, so we want to know if that gets called. We retrieve it from the storage, and then I want to make sure that these functions on the view were called 4 times. So let's just go ahead and get these all set up. Active drop down. So I want to make sure all of these things were called 4 times. As far as I know, that's all I need to do here. Okay, so we've written a test. It's not yet well formed, so I'll have to solve this problem. So what I'm going to do here is I'm now going to open up the logic class. I think I already have it open actually, our view logic. So where does this function come from? That comes from our abstract class. So I'm going to say extends base view logic. Base view logic has a generic type, and that will be our event. That will be our view event. Now I'm going to hit Alt-Enter, implement methods, and then we will have our entry point into the logic class, and this is how we will test all of the different functions of this logic class. I'm going to now run this test, knowing that it's going to fail, but just to make sure that the test is well formed. Gradle is building, so this could take a while. Okay, and we have a failing test, but that's okay because it's an assertion error. It's failing here, which is exactly what I want. Just a really quick answer. So Ravi was talking about how I have this convention of putting I in front of my interfaces, or many of them. The reason why I do that is just to make sure that I'm separating implementations, i.e. the classes which extend the interfaces, and the interfaces themselves, because I'll have a situation where we have something day storage and then day storage impl. It's really just a legibility convention, just to make it easier to read. I also found in Kotlin that the icons, they might have changed this, but in Java, the icon for an interface and the icon for a class is very different. It's like a green I versus a blue C. I found in Kotlin, for some reason, the icons weren't actually all that different from each other. It's just a Kotlin file, a KT file. And so that's one of the reasons why I got into that habit. But yeah, it's just a legibility concern. Okay, so we've got a failing test, which is exactly where we want to be. Now that I have a failing test, I can begin to actually write the unit that's failing. So I'm going to go into the our view logic class, and here's where this, remember we built this event class, I did that earlier. Here's where this is really going to help us out, because you're probably wondering, why did Ryan create an enum? Here's why. We've got our single entry point into this class, and we're going to use a switch statement, and we're going to say event. And I'm just going to, well, I'll try and write it by hand here. I was going to copy paste it, but let's just give this a go. So case our view event dot onStart is the one we're looking at. I think that thing needs to be public. Our view event, is that what's going on here? No, it's public. Our view event dot event. There we go. Dot onStart. Okay. Now, again, if you were a TDD purist, you wouldn't do what I'm about to do, but I'm actually just going to make all the different cases here. I'm not going to implement them, but I'm just going to make them. I think there was 4 of them. So this one will be on done click. This one will be on quarter toggled, on task selected. Okay, that's good to go. This is very similar to what I do in Kotlin using a sealed class and a when clause. And now we're going to implement our onStart thing here. So we're going to type onStart. We'll create a new method in this class. Alt-Enter, create method. And this method is going to be based on what I've written in here. So I've already written my test ahead of time, and I know what needs to get called. I've got a step-by-step instruction that I can follow. So writing the actual unit will now be easier because I've written the test ahead of time and the Javadoc comments ahead of time. Clearly, sorry, I'm getting tired. I've been talking for like an hour and 45 minutes here. Clearly, we need to request the our ID from the ViewModels. That's the first thing we'll do. So we'll say our equals vm.getOur, and then we will get the data from the storage. So we're going to say storage.get. Okay, this is something that I wasn't sure if I was going to do this or not. So we have a little design question. So I can either have the logic class here return the entire day object, or I can have my storage handle that for me. So I could have get hour is basically what I'm saying. Update hour. In thinking about it and visualizing it in my head, I think I actually have to add in get hour and get day. The reason why there's some confusion here is that hour is part of a day. But I realize I don't want to have to send back in an entire day object and hold on to the entire day object in memory in that particular view model. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make a change on the fly here because we are agile. We're going to say update hour and get hour. This one will have a continuation of type day. Sorry, hour. And update, that'll have an hour. And we're just going to do that. And then that's going to mean that I need to repair my fake that I created earlier. So let me just fix that up immediately. So I'm going to hit Alt-Enter, implement methods. And then, yeah, just going to copy and paste this basically. Get hour will return test data dot get test hour. This one will just return null. Okay, good. And we're good to go there. Now we can jump back into our class here. And now I'm going to say hour. I should probably call get hour. And it's still complaining because I need to create a continuation. And now you're going to see how the continuation works. So I'm going to hit Control P Hold on a minute. GetHour needs an ID. So this would be I think I have an enum for that. Do I? Just give me a minute. Okay, well, let me look at our... Okay, it's just an integer. Okay, so the ID for a given hour is going to be an integer. So what we'll do is we'll just pass in a int hour. That shouldn't be uppercase. Okay, and obviously that would be like hour 1 a.m. 0 to 23, basically. Okay, so we've got that set up. So we pass in an hour, which will be something that is, so this will actually become int hour equals vm.getHour.getHour, big surprise there. So we get the hour that was passed in by the activity, in case you're wondering where this thing is coming from. And then we're going to say getHour. So we pass in the ID, and then we create our continuation. And how I'm going to do that is we're going to say new callback, or no, continuation rather, of type hour, and boom, there we go. So we create, this is called an anonymous class. Unfortunately, in Java, even if you have lambdas enabled, if your lambda has multiple different functions or methods, then you have to still do the carpal tunnel inducing anonymous class syntax, but that's okay. It's not that bad. Okay, so let's just go back to our thing here. So we get the hour ID from ViewModel storage, done. We retrieve the hour from storage, and then we want to do our actual view binding work. So what we'll say is view, we're going to jump into a different function. We'll call it on hour retrieved. We'll give it that hour, and then I'll create that create method, and we won't create it in the anonymous class. It'll be in the body of our method here. And this is where we need to worry about binding that data to the view. So we're going to need a loop. I'm just trying to think of how to do this elegantly. I can iterate through an enum, I think. Is that a thing I can do? Let me see if I can iterate through an enum, because I think that'll make my life a lot easier. Java iterate through enum. Can you do that? Okay, I think I can do that. You'll see what I'm talking about in a moment. So for quarter Q, we'll call it that, quarter dot values. Okay, this could work. This should work. I probably need a iterator as well, an index. We'll see, int index equals 0. This is programming an algorithm on the fly here. And what we'll do is we'll say for each quarter, view dot set quarter hour text. God, I hope this works. We'll return Q, and then we'll say, and this is where we will, I think, need the index, but we'll see. We'll say result dot quarters, yes. Index, I might be doing that wrong, but we'll see. Dot get task name. Yes, I got it right. Oh, wow. Nobody's more surprised about that than I am. Okay, cool. Let me just clean this up a little bit so that it doesn't look so ridiculous. Okay, and then we obviously need to increment our index. So index plus plus. Okay, so if I'm correct, this should properly, based on each quarter, I'll need to call the other methods as well, but it should give the proper quarter and the proper value for that quarter, so the proper name of the task, for example. You can have different tasks on different quarter hours, and that should work properly, I hope. Let's just hit Control D. So this will be set quarter hour active, and then dot get I might have not included that as a field in quarter hour. Did I forget to do that? Oops, that's not the right one. Yes, I did forget to do that. So I need to, on the fly, add in another field here. So we'll say this is a Boolean, and this will be is active. And I'll obviously have to add that in everywhere. Boolean is active. This dot is active equals is active. And then I'll add in the getter for that. Yes, okay. Oh, need a semicolon. Okay, and then we'll say get is active. Okay, why is that not showing up? Oh, it's just called is active. I'm just going to change that. We'll call that get is active. Okay, cool. So that gets our Boolean. And then we need to add the, what was the last one here? Set quarter hour drop down. So this one just receives a task. So we say get task name. Okay, I screwed up. This is not get task name. This is get quarter. I need to include the hour. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm just going to update this interface. So for quarter hour text, we need to also pass in the hour. I'll pass that in as a string. Oh, I already did. Well, I'm an idiot. Okay, apparently I already did that. So we don't need to pass in the... We do need to pass in the quarter. Quarter, string hour. And then that should be fine. Okay. So set quarter hour text. We pass in the quarter. We get the hour. So just result.get hour. Okay, there we go. Dot toString. Why is that not working? Oh, right, this is Java. Sometimes I forget, so we have to go integer.toString, nest that stupid thing in there. I'm so used to Kotlin still. Okay, so we pass in, okay, that should be correct. This one down here, get task name. Here's what I'm humming and hawing over here. So I either have the... Yeah, okay. That's got to just be task name. So that's fine. Yes, that's fine. I'll be able to make that work. Okay, sorry. Okay, so good. We've got that implemented properly, I think. So now what we're going to do, I'll just fix this error here. Why is it complaining? Do I need to call the... There we go. Really? Oh, okay. It just wants me to get rid of the qualified name. Okay. Okay, good. So we've got rid of the errors. Now after I've attempted to implement that particular feature, now I'm going to rerun the test and see if the test works properly. Oh. I'll worry about implementing that later, not important. Yeah. Okay, what is this thing complaining about here? Get hour. I think you need an int hour. Is that what you're complaining about? I'm so confused. There we go. Sooner or later, I will be able to run this test. It might take a while. What the hell is that? This doesn't look right at all. Quarter. Okay, so it needs a Boolean here. We'll just say false for now. Let's just do that. What I'm doing here is I'm just trying to get to the point where I can even compile and run my test. And there we have it, and we are in the green. That's what we like to see. All right, so let me just run this one more time so you can watch it in full glory. Boom, test passed. So that means, assuming I have a well-formed test, that this function that I just wrote, these series of functions to retrieve an hour from storage and then to draw the user interface appropriately, is correct. And I can move on to the next unit to test, which would be on done click. But I've been talking for almost 2 hours. So what I'm going to do, let's just go to our to-do list here. Done. 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 Well, more or less. And yeah, done. Got the green. All right, everybody. So I'm going to leave in a few minutes, but I will stick around momentarily to answer any more questions. And I am thoroughly exhausted because honestly, like, building applications for 2 hours is, usually I need a break after that. But talking while building applications is particularly exhausting for me. But that's okay. Sometimes you gotta hustle. All right. So What's up, Orel? Oro Zilberman asks, what is your favorite architecture? Well, my answer to that question is that when you get as good as me with architecture, then you get to invent your own software architectures. So the honest truth about MVP, MVVM, MVC is that every one of those is good in some situations and bad in other situations. And very often you will have a problem so complex that you cannot just use 3 layers. So if I show you what I've got in here, I just use my own architecture. Sometimes you will see, I wish I could zoom in more, but I can't here. Sometimes you will see model view logic, view model view logic. You'll see all kinds of different things. Let me link you to an article which will explain what software architecture is. Where is it? Here we go. There we go. Yeah, do consider checking that link out. But yeah, there's so much misinformation that goes around on software architectures that it drives me insane. If you want to know exactly how to build architectures like I do, I explain it in very clear and simple detail in bite-sized videos in my course, Working Class Java. So, link in the description box below for my Skillshare promotional link, where you can get 2 months free on Skillshare, and you can look at all of my courses where I explain all this stuff I just covered in detail. Next question. Is it decent to use Firestore for a 1,000 to 10,000 users application? I would say that's almost like an ideal size to use something like Firebase, or Firestore. When would you want to use Firestore versus when would you not want to? The benefit of using Firestore is that you don't have, and Firebase in general, is that you don't have to code and maintain and administer your own backend server, your own backend application, because that's effectively what Firebase is. It's a backend on Rails, a cloud remote server on Rails. Now the problem with that is that these things are not too expensive when you have a smaller user base, but as your user base grows, you will more and more have to pay a lot of money to Firebase for that thing to work properly. They have different plans. I couldn't tell you exactly when you'll have to be paying them a ton of money. I don't know if it's 1 million users or what, but basically every time one of your users makes a request to Firebase, that will be recorded, and there will come a point where those interactions will start to cost you a lot of money. More money than if you had built your own cloud server. What those exact figures are and amounts, I couldn't really tell you, but yeah. So what you're saying here, for 1,000 to 10,000 users, if you don't want to learn how to make your own backend server, which is totally fine, maybe you want to learn that later, or it just doesn't interest you, I think that would be an ideal size for something like Firebase or Amazon Web Services. All right. I'll wait 2 more minutes and then I will call it a day. But yeah, hopefully that was interesting. I know we didn't get many concurrent viewers, but that's just the nature of doing advanced Android test-driven development, clean architecture type coding. Many people who would like to be interested in it don't even know where to get started. So that's my content in a nutshell. I've got some of the most advanced content on the web that nobody watches. That's also a side effect of me not being very good at search engine optimization. Okay, everybody, I think I'm going to call it a day. I don't see any questions popping up, so that'll be it. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you learned a bunch of stuff. I see someone just joined us, but unfortunately, Prince, you're going to have to go back and watch the recorded version if you want to see what we did today. And yeah, thanks for watching. Peace out.